Aria will never amount to anything more than white trash and a designer knockoff. That's what my cousin Veronica announced to the entire Fairmont family reunion, her voice cutting through the country club's marble-columned dining room like a blade. I'm Aria Castellano. I'm 32 years old, and I just got publicly humiliated in front of 47 relatives who nodded in agreement while sipping champagne that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But here's the thing about family reunions. They have a funny way of revealing who people really are. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person everyone counted out is the one holding all the cards. The Fairmont family reunion happens every 3 years at the exclusive Willowbrook Country Club in Newport Heights. It's where my mother's side of the family gathers to showcase their accumulated wealth, compare investment portfolios, and remind each other of the pecking order that was established decades ago. The Fairmonts built their fortune in shipping and real estate, creating a dynasty that spans 4 generations of old money prestige. At the top of the hierarchy sits my great-aunt Beatrice Fairmont Sterling, the family matriarch who controls the $200 million family trust with an iron fist wrapped in Hermes gloves. Below her, the various branches compete for favor, status, and ultimately, inheritance consideration. There's Uncle Theodore, with his chain of luxury hotels, Aunt Vivienne, who married into pharmaceutical money, and Cousin Veronica, the golden child who graduated summa cum laude from Whitmore University and now runs the family's charitable foundation. Then there's my branch of the family tree. My mother, Elena, was the black sheep who fell in love with a mechanic named Roberto Castellano and chose passion over pedigree. When she died in a car accident when I was 12, my father and I were effectively erased from family gatherings, holiday cards, and any meaningful connection to the Fairmont legacy. I grew up in Riverside Park, a working-class neighborhood, where my father ran Castellano's auto repair out of a converted warehouse. Our house was a modest 2-bedroom with peeling paint and a front yard that was more dirt than grass. While my cousins attended private schools and spent summers in the Hamptons, I learned to change oil, fix transmissions, and understand that a dollar earned through honest work was worth more than 100 handed down through bloodline. The last time I had seen most of these people was at my high school graduation, 15 years ago. My father had saved up to buy me a dress from Nordstrom, nothing fancy, but clean and appropriate. Aunt Vivienne had taken one look at me and whispered to Veronica loud enough for me to hear, "It's such a shame about Elena's daughter. She'll probably end up pregnant and working at some diner." That night, I made myself a promise. I would show them exactly what Roberto Castellano's daughter could become. But promises made at 18 hit differently when you're standing in a country club at 32, wearing a dress you bought on clearance, watching your cousins discuss their latest European vacations while their children attend the same elite preparatory schools they once did. The weight of 15 years of distance felt heavier than I had expected. I almost didn't come. The invitation had arrived at my apartment in Millfield, a studio above a bakery where I'd been living since my divorce 2 years ago. The elegant cardstock with its gold-embossed lettering felt like a cruel joke. The Fairmont family cordially invites you, as if I had ever been anything more than an obligation they occasionally remembered existed. But something inside me needed to be there. Maybe it was curiosity about how the family had changed, or perhaps it was the stubborn streak I inherited from my father. Whatever it was, I'd driven my 10-year-old Honda Civic 3 hours to Newport Heights, checked into a budget motel, and walked into that country club with my head held high. The reunion was exactly what I had expected, a carefully orchestrated display of wealth and status. Cousin Bradley was showing off photos of his new yacht, Veronica's husband was discussing his recent promotion to partner at a prestigious law firm. The younger generation, my second cousins, were already being groomed for Ivy League schools and internships at Fortune 500 companies. I'd managed to make small talk for about an hour, deflecting questions about my career and living situation with vague responses. I was actually starting to think I might make it through the evening with my dignity intact when the photographer arrived. "Let's get a family photo," Aunt Beatrice announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. 4 generations of Fairmont success. As we arranged ourselves in the main dining room, I found myself relegated to the back row, partially hidden behind Uncle Theodore's broad shoulders. It was a small slight, but in a family where position meant everything, the message was clear. I was barely worth including in the frame. That's when Veronica decided to twist the knife. "You know," she said, her voice saccharine sweet as she adjusted her position in the front row, "I was just telling Mother how brave Aria is for coming tonight. After all, it takes real courage to show up somewhere you so obviously don't belong." The photographer paused, sensing tension. Aunt Beatrice's lips pursed with disapproval, although whether it was directed at Veronica's cruelty or my presence wasn't clear. "I mean," Veronica continued, warming to her theme, "some people are just born to different circumstances. There's nothing wrong with being working class, of course. Not everyone can have breeding and education." My face burned with humiliation, but I kept my mouth shut. I'd learned long ago that responding to Veronica's barbs only gave her more ammunition. But she wasn't finished.
"Aria will never amount to anything more than white trash in a designer knockoff," she declared, her eyes scanning my clearance dress with obvious disdain. "Some people just lack the refined genetics necessary for true success." The room fell silent except for the soft clink of crystal glasses being nervously adjusted. Even by Fairmont standards, Veronica had crossed a line. But no one spoke up. No one defended me. They just stood there, complicit in their silence. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in exactly 47 minutes, everything they thought they understood about Aria Castellano was about to change forever. Growing up as a Fairmont was supposed to mean something. It meant trust funds, summer houses, and automatic acceptance to elite universities. It meant your last name opened doors before you even had to knock. For everyone else in my family, it meant a gilded path from cradle to grave, each generation building upon the wealth and connections of those who came before. But that was never my reality. My mother, Elena Fairmont, was supposed to marry Jonathan Whitworth III, the heir to a banking fortune who would have cemented our family's position in Newport Heights society for another generation. The engagement announcement had already been printed in the society pages when she met my father at a charity car show in 1989. Roberto Castellano was there working on a vintage Mustang that was being auctioned for charity. He was 25, had grease under his fingernails, and spoke with the slight accent of someone whose parents had immigrated from Sicily with nothing but determination and hope. When the engine wouldn't start before the auction, Roberto dove under the hood in his one good suit and had it purring in 15 minutes. My mother told me later that she fell in love with his hands, not because they were smooth and manicured like Jonathan's, but because they could create, fix, and build. Those hands represented something real in a world of inherited privilege and empty accomplishments. The Fairmont family was horrified. Aunt Beatrice actually tried to have Roberto's background investigated, convinced he was some kind of fortune hunter. When the private investigator came back with reports of a hardworking man who'd put himself through community college while working nights at the garage, she was somehow even more disgusted. "At least a proper gold digger would have ambition," she'd reportedly said. Alina was given an ultimatum: Roberto or the family fortune. She chose love. They eloped to Las Vegas 3 months later, and by the time I was born, my mother had been effectively excommunicated from the Fairmont dynasty. We lived in Riverside Park, a neighborhood where kids played in the streets because their backyards were too small for swing sets, and where the ice cream truck's tinkling melody was the highlight of summer afternoons. My childhood was a study in contrasts. While cousin Veronica took riding lessons at the prestigious Willowbrook Equestrian Center, I learned to change spark plugs in my father's garage. While cousin Bradley attended cotillion classes to learn proper ballroom dancing, I helped my dad rebuild engines and learned that the most elegant dance was the choreography between human hands and mechanical precision. But I wasn't bitter about it, not then. My parents loved each other with the kind of fierce devotion that made our small house feel larger than any mansion. My father would come home with motor oil-stained fingernails and sweep my mother into his arms like she was still the debutante who'd chosen him over a fortune. She'd cook elaborate Italian dinners using recipes his grandmother had brought from the old country, filling our tiny kitchen with laughter and the smell of fresh basil. The Fairmont money might have bought comfort, but it couldn't buy what we had. Then came October 15th, 1998. I was 12 years old, sitting in my 7th grade algebra class when the principal walked in with red-rimmed eyes and whispered something to Mrs. Patterson that made her face go white. A drunk driver had run a red light at the intersection of Maple and 5th Street. My mother's car, a practical Honda sedan that my father had meticulously maintained, was hit on the driver's side at 45 miles per hour. She died instantly, the paramedic said, which was supposed to be some kind of mercy, but felt like the cruelest fact in the universe. The funeral was the last time I saw most of my Fairmont relatives until tonight. They came, dressed in appropriate black, and spoke in hushed tones about such a tragedy and poor Roberto and what will happen to the child. I remember standing at the graveside watching Aunt Beatrice dab her eyes with a lace handkerchief and wondering if she was crying for my mother or for the mess Elena had left behind. After the service, there was a brief, awkward conversation about my situation. Would my father be able to provide for me properly? Shouldn't I come live with family who could give me the advantages I deserved? I was 12, but I wasn't stupid. I could hear the subtext. Now that Elena has gone, maybe they could salvage one more Fairmont from the wreckage of her poor choices. My father's response was quiet but firm. Aria stays with me. And that was it. No custody battle, no legal challenges. The Fairmonts retreated to their world of charity galas and tennis tournaments, and we were left to grieve and rebuild in our small house where every corner still smelled like my mother's perfume.
For a while, that was enough. My father threw himself into work, expanding Castellano's auto repair from a one-man operation to a modest shop with 3 employees. I helped out after school and on weekends, learning the difference between a carburetor and a catalytic converter, discovering that I had inherited both my mother's sharp mind and my father's mechanical intuition. But it was on a Tuesday afternoon in March of my senior year when everything truly changed. I was 17, buried in college applications at the kitchen table, when Mrs. Hernandez from next door knocked on our front door. She was crying, clutching an eviction notice in her weathered hands. Her husband had been laid off from the factory 3 months earlier, and they were 60 days behind on rent. "I don't know what we're going to do, Roberto," she sobbed. "Maria starts college in the fall. If we lose the house..." My father listened quietly, then disappeared into his bedroom. He came back with an envelope containing $2,400 in cash, money I knew he'd been saving to fix the shop's perpetually broken air conditioning system. "Pay your rent," he said simply. "We'll figure out the rest later." That night, lying in bed listening to my father toss and turn in the room next to me, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to just escape Riverside Park and prove myself worthy of the Fairmont name. I was going to build something that would make the Fairmont fortune look like pocket change. And I was going to do it my way, with grease under my fingernails and my father's values as my foundation. The idea came to me while I was working on a customer's transmission the next weekend. I was elbow-deep in gear assemblies when I noticed something interesting about the wear patterns on the components. There was a story being told in those metal surfaces, a narrative of stress, friction, and mechanical relationships that, if properly analyzed, could predict failures before they happened. I stayed up all night sketching diagrams and equations on the back of homework assignments. What if you could create a diagnostic system that could read the mechanical DNA of any vehicle and predict exactly when components would fail? What if you could revolutionize the entire automotive maintenance industry by making repair scheduling as precise as a Swiss watch? That night, I chose innovation over inheritance, vision over validation. I had no idea that this decision would eventually lead me back to this country club, 15 years later, with my cousin's words still ringing in my ears and a secret that would shatter everything the Fairmont family thought they knew about success.
The summer before my senior year of college at Riverside Community College changed everything. I had been accepted to transfer to Westfield Institute of Technology, a prestigious engineering school that would have put me on track for a comfortable career in automotive design. The acceptance letter was pinned to my bedroom wall like a trophy, and my father had already started working overtime to help pay for the tuition that my partial scholarship wouldn't cover. But destiny has a way of derailing even the most carefully laid plans. I was working the late shift at Castellano's Auto Repair, finishing up a brake job on a customer sedan, when Dr. Patricia Morrison walked through our garage doors at 9:47 p.m. She was driving a pristine 1995 Mercedes E-Class that was making a sound like a dying whale every time she pressed the accelerator. Dr. Morrison wasn't from our neighborhood. Everything about her screamed success, from her tailored blazer to the way she spoke with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. She was a professor of mechanical engineering at Westfield Institute of Technology, and her car had broken down on the highway during her drive back from a conference in Chicago. "Every shop between here and the interstate is closed," she said, glancing around our modest garage with obvious skepticism. "The tow truck driver said you might still be open." I could have done a standard diagnostic, identified the problem as a failing mass airflow sensor, replaced it with a generic part, and sent her on her way for $200. Instead, something compelled me to show her what I'd been working on. For months, I'd been developing a prototype diagnostic system using salvaged computer parts and software I'd taught myself to code during slow afternoons at the shop. The system could analyze engine performance patterns in real time and predict component failures with an accuracy that I even found startling. I connected my makeshift device to her Mercedes and watched the screen populate with data streams that painted a complete picture of her engine's health. Not only did it identify the immediate problem, but it revealed that her transmission was showing early signs of wear that would likely require attention within the next 8,000 miles, and her water pump was operating at 73% efficiency. Still functional, but approaching the threshold where replacement would be more cost-effective than continued maintenance. Dr. Morrison stared at the screen for a full minute without speaking. "Where did you learn to do this?" she finally asked. "I taught myself," I replied, suddenly self-conscious about my grease-stained coveralls and the fact that my revolutionary diagnostic system was held together with electrical tape and determination.
She spent the next 2 hours asking questions I'd never heard before. Questions about algorithm development, statistical modeling, and patent law. Questions that made me realize that what I'd created in my father's garage wasn't just a clever tool. It was potentially the foundation for an entirely new industry. "Forget Westfield Institute," she said as I finished replacing her mass airflow sensor. "What you've built here is worth more than anything they could teach you in a classroom. Have you considered starting your own company?" I laughed. The idea seemed absurd. I was a 20-year-old community college student living above an auto repair shop. I didn't have startup capital or business connections or any of the resources that real entrepreneurs possessed. But Dr. Morrison was serious. She handed me her card and made an offer that would change my life forever. "I have some connections in the venture capital world," she said. "People who understand disruptive technology when they see it. If you're willing to take a risk, I can introduce you to investors who might be very interested in what you've created." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the garage until dawn, staring at my diagnostic system and trying to process what Dr. Morrison had suggested. The smart thing would be to finish my degree, get a stable job with good benefits, and maybe tinker with my invention in my spare time until it was ready for the market. But there was something electric about the possibilities she'd presented. The chance to build something revolutionary from the ground up, to prove that innovation could come from anywhere, even from a small garage in Riverside Park. 3 weeks later, I found myself in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Capital City, sitting across from 3 venture capitalists who had flown in specifically to see my demonstration. I'd never been in a building that tall before,
and the view of the city skyline from the 42nd floor made me dizzy. The presentation went perfectly. My diagnostic system analyzed the performance characteristics of a luxury SUV they'd brought for the demonstration, identifying issues that their own mechanics had missed, and providing maintenance recommendations that could extend the vehicle's lifespan by an estimated 40,000 miles. The lead investor, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Walsh, leaned back in her chair and smiled. "How much do you need to get this to market?" $200,000, I said, a number Dr. Morrison had helped me calculate. "Done," she replied. "But there's one condition. You'll need to relocate to Capital City and commit to this full time. No more auto repair shop, no more college. This becomes your life." I should have said yes immediately. It was everything I dreamed of: validation, financial backing, and the opportunity to revolutionize an entire industry. But I hesitated, thinking about my father and the shop he'd built with his own hands, the community that had supported us through my mother's death, and the life I'd be leaving behind. That hesitation cost me everything. "I need some time to think about it," I said. Catherine Walsh's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the room's energy. "Time is a luxury in this business, Miss Castellano. Innovation waits for no one, and neither do we. We need an answer now." I thought about my father working 16-hour days to save money for my college tuition. I thought about Mrs. Hernandez and all the other neighbors who'd supported our family through the years. I thought about the promise I'd made to my mother's memory to build something meaningful. "I need 2 weeks," I said finally, "to arrange things with my father and finish my current obligations." The silence stretched for what felt like hours. "I'm afraid that's not acceptable," Catherine Walsh said, closing her portfolio. "We're flying to San Francisco tomorrow to meet with another company that's developing similar technology. If you're not ready to commit, we'll find someone who is." And just like that, the opportunity evaporated. Dr. Morrison tried to mediate, suggesting alternative arrangements that might allow me to maintain some connection to home while pursuing the venture. But the damage was done. The investors had interpreted my hesitation as a lack of commitment, and in their world, uncertainty was synonymous with failure. I drove back to Riverside Park that night, feeling like I'd betrayed not just myself, but every person who'd ever believed in me. My father was waiting in the garage, working on an engine rebuild that could have waited until morning. "How did it go?" he asked, without looking up from the valve assembly he was installing. "I offered them the world," I said, and I turned it down. He nodded slowly, still focused on his work. "Sometimes the world comes with conditions we can't accept." But I knew I made a mistake that would haunt me for the next decade, as I watched other companies develop similar technology and capture the market I could have dominated. I stayed at Westfield Institute, earned my engineering degree, and spent the next 10 years working for other people's companies, helping them implement innovations that paled in comparison to what I'd created in my father's garage. The rejection letters started arriving 6 months later. Every major automotive manufacturer I'd approached with my diagnostic system sent polite but firm declinations. The technology was interesting, but not market-ready. The business model was unproven. My lack of corporate backing made me an unacceptable risk. What I didn't know then was that Catherine Walsh's venture capital firm had quietly shopped my concepts to their existing portfolio companies, describing my work as preliminary research that their own engineers could improve upon and bring to market properly. By the time I realized what had happened, 3 different companies were developing diagnostic systems based on principles remarkably similar to my original design. My patent applications were rejected on the grounds that the technology was too general and insufficiently novel.
I'd been systematically erased from my own innovation. The final humiliation came 2 years later, when Autotech Industries, one of Catherine Walsh's portfolio companies, launched their revolutionary diagnostic platform at the International Auto Show. The system was nearly identical to what I'd demonstrated in that conference room, but refined with the resources and expertise that venture capital could provide. The industry press hailed it as a breakthrough that would fundamentally transform automotive maintenance.
Autotech's stock price tripled in the first week after launch. Catherine Walsh was featured on the cover of Forbes as the woman who's revolutionizing how we fix cars. And I was back in Riverside Park, working for a regional automotive supplier, watching my dreams being lived by someone else. That night, staring at the Forbes article on my laptop screen, I made a new promise. This time, I wouldn't be naive about the business world's ruthlessness. This time, I would play the game better than anyone else. This time, I would build something so undeniably mine that no one could steal it, copy it, or claim credit for it. I just had no idea it would take me 10 more years to get that chance. The next 5 years passed in a blur of corporate mediocrity and slowly dying dreams. I worked as a junior engineer at Meridian Automotive Solutions, a mid-tier supplier that specialized in aftermarket diagnostic equipment. It was honest work, and it paid well enough to help my father modernize the shop and even take a vacation for the first time since my mother died. But every day, I watched Autotech Industries expand their market share using technology that should have been mine. And every day, a little more of my spirit withered. The worst part wasn't the financial loss, though watching Catherine Walsh's net worth climb into the hundreds of millions while I struggled to pay off my student loans was its own special torture. The worst part was the slow realization that I'd been fundamentally naive about how the world actually worked. I'd believed that good ideas and hard work were enough, that innovation would be rewarded regardless of where it came from. The business world had taught me otherwise, and the lesson was brutal in its efficiency. By 2019, I was 28 years old and completely lost. I had been promoted twice at Meridian, earned the respect of my colleagues, and had a comfortable apartment in Millfield with a view of the park where I used to play as a child. On paper, my life looked successful, but every morning I woke up feeling like I was living someone else's existence. Then my father had his heart attack. It happened on Tuesday morning in March. He was working on a customer's truck when the chest pain started. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was unconscious on the garage floor, his face gray and his breathing shallow. I got the call while I was in a meeting about quarterly productivity metrics, and I remember the exact moment when my carefully constructed professional facade cracked completely. The next 3 weeks in the cardiac intensive care unit at Riverside General Hospital were the longest of my life. My father survived the initial attack, but the damage to his heart was extensive. The doctors spoke in careful, clinical terms about lifestyle modifications and reduced capacity, but what they meant was simple. Roberto Castellano would never again be able to run his auto repair shop. During those long hours sitting beside his hospital bed, watching the steady rhythm of machines keeping him alive, I was forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about the choices I'd made. I'd spent 7 years chasing corporate success while my father worked alone in the garage, lifting heavy engines and crawling under cars that younger men should have been handling. I had been so focused on proving myself in the business world that I'd forgotten the most important lesson he ever taught me. Family comes first. Always. The financial reality hit like a second heart attack. My father's medical bills weren't completely covered by his basic insurance plan, and the shop's income stopped the moment he was hospitalized. He had 3 employees depending on their paychecks, customers with vehicles in various stages of repair, and a business loan he had taken out 2 years earlier to upgrade the hydraulic lifts. I took a leave of absence from Meridian and moved back to Riverside Park to manage the crisis. The house felt smaller than I remembered, and every room was filled with reminders of the life I had tried so hard to escape. My childhood bedroom still had posters of race cars on the walls and a desk where I did homework while the engine repairs echoed from the garage below. For 3 months, I ran Castellano's auto repair while my father slowly recovered. I was rusty at the hands-on work, and my engineering background didn't translate as smoothly to practical repairs as I had expected. The employees, Louis, Marcus, and old Frank, who had been with my father for 15 years, were patient with me, but I could see the worry in their eyes. They knew the shop was struggling, and they knew their jobs depended on decisions I wasn't qualified to make. The breaking point came on a sweltering Thursday in June. I was working on a transmission replacement that should have taken 3 hours, but had stretched into its second day due to my inexperience. The customer, a single mother named Janet, whose Honda was her only means of getting to work, had called twice asking when her car would be ready. I was lying on my back under the vehicle, wrestling with a particularly stubborn bolt, when I heard Frank talking to her in the front office. "Miss Rodriguez, I'm real sorry about the delay," he said, his voice heavy with embarrassment. "We're a little short-handed right now, and the job's taking longer than expected."
"I understand," she replied, but I could hear the stress in her voice. "It's just that I need the car for work tomorrow. I can't afford to miss any more days." I slid out from under the Honda, covered in transmission fluid and grease, my hands shaking with frustration. This was exactly the kind of situation my father would have handled with grace and expertise. He would have had Janet's car running perfectly in half the time it was taking me, and she would have left Bishop confident that she'd received excellent service. Instead, she was dealing with an amateur who was learning on the job while her livelihood hung in the balance. That night, I sat in the garage after everyone had gone home, staring at the diagnostic equipment I'd helped my father purchase over the years. Some of it was technology I'd recommended based on my experience at Meridian, improvements that had made the shop more efficient and profitable. But none of it mattered if I couldn't translate my knowledge into the kind of practical skill that actually helped people. The phone rang at 11:30 p.m. It was my father, calling from his bedroom upstairs where he was supposed to be resting. "How did the transmission job go?" he asked. I could have lied. I could have told him everything was fine and that I had everything under control. Instead, I told him the truth. "I'm failing, Dad. I'm failing you. I'm failing the employees, and I'm failing the customers. I don't know how to do this." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You know what your mother used to say when you were little and got frustrated with something difficult?" he finally asked. "No." "She'd say that the difference between giving up and breaking through is usually about one more try. One more attempt with everything you've learned from the previous failures." But this wasn't about one more try. This was about the fundamental realization that I'd spent 7 years running from the life I was meant to live, chasing validation from people who would never see me as anything more than a useful resource to be exploited. I'd thought success meant escaping Riverside Park and proving myself in the corporate world. Instead, I'd discovered that success meant something entirely different and much more difficult to achieve. The next morning, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. I called my supervisor at Meridian and submitted my resignation. Then, I called the bank and inquired about the process for taking over my father's business loan. Finally, I sat down with Louis, Marcus, and Frank and told them that Castellano's Auto Repair wasn't going anywhere. "I'm going to learn this business properly," I told them, "and I'm going to run it the way my father taught me, with integrity, skill, and respect for the people who trust us with their vehicles." Frank smiled for the first time since my father's heart attack. "Miss Aria, your father's going to be real proud when he hears about this." But pride wasn't going to pay the bills or teach me the skills I needed to succeed. Over the following months, I threw myself into learning every aspect of automotive repair with the same intensity I'd once applied to my engineering studies. I worked 16-hour days, took online courses in business management, and slowly, painfully began to understand what it truly meant to run a small business. The financial pressure was relentless. Some weeks I had to choose between paying the employees and paying the rent. I sold my car and rode a bicycle to work. I moved back into my childhood bedroom to save money on rent. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches while I watched my savings account dwindle toward zero. My old colleagues from Meridian occasionally called to check in on me, their voices filled with a mixture of concern and bewilderment. They couldn't understand why I'd given up a promising engineering career to run a struggling auto repair shop in a working-class neighborhood. From their perspective, I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had.
But for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. What I didn't know then was that this period of struggle and uncertainty was preparing me for something much bigger than saving my father's business. Every customer interaction, every financial crisis, every night spent learning new skills was building the foundation for what would eventually become the most successful automotive technology company in the world. But in those dark months of 2019, as I struggled to keep Castellano's auto repair afloat while my father recovered, success felt like a luxury I couldn't afford to even dream about. By the winter of 2020, I'd finally found my rhythm running Castellano's auto repair. The learning curve had been steep and painful, but I was no longer the fumbling amateur who had nearly destroyed Janet Rodriguez's transmission. My father was back to working part-time, handling the lighter jobs and providing guidance when I encountered something beyond my experience. The shop was profitable again, our customer base was growing, and for the first time in months, I could sleep through the night without worrying about making payroll. But I was also profoundly lonely. Running a small business in a working-class neighborhood was isolating in ways I hadn't anticipated. My days were filled with customer interactions and employee management, but my evenings were spent alone in my childhood bedroom, reviewing financial statements and planning the next day's work schedule. My friends from Meridian had stopped calling after months of declined invitations to happy hours and weekend trips I couldn't afford. The few relationships I had attempted had withered under the pressure of 16-hour workdays and the constant stress of keeping the business afloat.
I was 30 years old, successful by my own modest standards, but completely cut off from any meaningful personal connections outside of my work and family. That changed on a Tuesday morning in February when Dr. Samantha Chen walked into our garage carrying a steaming cup of coffee and wearing the most expensive winter coat I'd ever seen outside of a magazine. She was driving a Tesla Model S that had been making an intermittent grinding noise for 3 weeks, and she'd already taken it to 2 different dealerships without getting a satisfactory diagnosis. "I know you don't typically work on electric vehicles," she said, her breath visible in the cold air of the garage, "but I'm desperate. Everyone else keeps telling me the car is fine, but I know something's wrong." Dr. Chen wasn't from Riverside Park. That much was obvious from her designer boots and the way she spoke with the measured cadence of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. But there was something refreshingly direct about her approach. She didn't condescend or explain things I already knew, and she didn't seem surprised that the shop's lead mechanic was a woman barely older than herself. What made her different from our usual customers was her background. Dr. Samantha Chen held a PhD in materials engineering from Stanford University and had spent the previous 5 years working for Apex Dynamics, one of the most innovative battery technology companies in the world. She'd moved to Capital City 6 months earlier to head up research and development for a new division focused on automotive applications. As I began my diagnostic work on her Tesla, she asked questions that revealed a level of technical understanding I rarely encountered. She understood the complexities of electric motor systems, battery management protocols, and regenerative braking algorithms. But more importantly, she listened to my explanations with genuine interest rather than the polite tolerance most customers displayed when I detailed my findings. The problem with her car turned out to be subtle but potentially serious: a manufacturing defect in one of the motor bearing assemblies that was causing microscopic metal particles to contaminate the cooling system. It wasn't something that would show up on standard diagnostic equipment, but I developed techniques for identifying these kinds of issues during my years of hands-on experience, combined with my engineering background. "How did you know to look for that?" she asked as I explained my diagnosis. "Experience," I said, "and a healthy skepticism of manufacturer claims about perfect engineering." She laughed, a genuine, delighted sound that I realized I hadn't heard in months. "You know, you'd fit right in at my lab. Half of our work involves figuring out why things that should work perfectly in theory keep failing in the real world." What started as a routine repair turned into a 3-hour conversation about the intersection of theoretical engineering and practical application.
Dr. Chen, call me Sam, she insisted, was fascinated by my approach to automotive diagnostics, particularly my ability to identify problems that sophisticated computer systems missed. You're solving problems with intuition and experience that we're trying to crack with machine learning algorithms and artificial intelligence, she said, and honestly, you're getting better results. As I worked on her car, she told me about her current project at Apex Dynamics. They were developing next-generation battery management systems for electric vehicles, but they were struggling with real-world performance issues that didn't show up in laboratory testing. The technology worked perfectly under controlled conditions, but failed unpredictably when subjected to the stresses and variables of actual driving. We've got brilliant engineers and unlimited funding, she said, but we're missing something fundamental about how these systems behave in practice. That evening, after Sam had picked up her repaired Tesla and driven back to Capital City, I found myself thinking about our conversation. There was something familiar about the problem she'd described. The gap between theoretical perfection and practical reality, the challenge of predicting system failures before they occurred, the frustration of having advanced technology that couldn't account for human variables. I spent the next week researching Apex Dynamics and their current projects. What I discovered was both fascinating and frustrating. They were working on innovations that could revolutionize electric vehicle technology, but their approach was entirely theoretical. They were trying to solve practical problems with pure engineering without considering the messy realities of how people actually use their vehicles. 2 weeks later, Sam returned to the shop. This time, she wasn't there for car repairs. "I have a proposition for you," she said, settling into the worn chair beside my desk in the shop's tiny office. "And before you say no, hear me out completely." She explained that Apex Dynamics was facing a critical deadline on their new battery management project. Despite months of development and millions of dollars in research funding, their system kept failing in field tests. The technology was theoretically sound, but it couldn't adapt to the infinite variables of real-world driving conditions. "We need someone who understands how cars actually behave," she said, "someone who can bridge the gap between our laboratory perfection and the chaos of actual roads, weather, and human behavior." The offer was compelling, a 6-month consulting contract that would pay more than I typically earned in a year, working part-time while maintaining my responsibilities at the shop. But what really captured my attention was the opportunity to work on cutting-edge technology that could actually make a difference in people's lives. "Why me?" I asked. "You could hire any number of experienced automotive engineers with better credentials and more impressive resumes."
Sam smiled. Because impressive resumes and fancy credentials are exactly what got us into this mess. We need someone who understands the difference between how things are supposed to work and how they actually work. Someone who's solved problems with their hands instead of just their computer. I thought about the years I'd spent watching other people profit from my innovations, the opportunities I'd lost because I didn't fit the traditional mold of what investors expected from entrepreneurs. This felt different. This felt like a chance to contribute my expertise without sacrificing my values or abandoning the life I'd built. "What exactly would I be doing?" I asked. "Field testing," she said, "taking our prototypes out into the real world and figuring out why they break. Then working with our engineering team to develop solutions that account for variables we never considered in the lab." The project started small. 3 days a week, I would drive to Apex Dynamics' testing facility outside Capital City and spend the day putting their battery management prototypes through scenarios that would never occur in a controlled laboratory environment. I tested their systems in sub-zero temperatures and desert heat, during stop-and-go traffic and high-speed highway driving, with aggressive acceleration and gentle cruising. More importantly, I documented every failure and explained not just what went wrong, but why it went wrong from a practical perspective. My reports became legendary within the company, detailed analyses that combined engineering rigor with the kind of intuitive understanding that only comes from years of hands-on experience. Within 2 months, Sam's team had redesigned their entire approach based on my field testing results. Instead of trying to create a perfect system that could handle any conceivable scenario, they developed an adaptive system that learned from real-world conditions and adjusted its performance accordingly. The breakthrough came on a Thursday in May.
I was testing the latest prototype during rush hour traffic in downtown Capital City when something remarkable happened. The system didn't just manage the battery efficiently, it predicted and prevented a potential failure that would have left the driver stranded on the highway. "Aria," Sam said when I called her with the results, "I think you just solved a problem that's been plaguing the entire electric vehicle industry." But this was just the beginning. As word of our success spread within Apex Dynamics, other divisions began requesting my consulting services. The autonomous vehicle team wanted help understanding why their systems failed in construction zones and school pickup lines. The charging infrastructure group needed assistance designing stations that could handle the chaos of real-world usage patterns. For the first time since my disastrous experience with Catherine Walsh's venture capital firm years earlier, I was working on technology that had the potential to change the world. But this time, I was doing it on my own terms, maintaining my connection to Castellano's Auto Repair and the community that had supported me through my darkest moments. What I didn't realize was that Sam Chen would become much more than a business partner. She would become the ally who would help me transform everything I'd learned into something that would make even the Fairmont fortune look modest by comparison. Success at Apex Dynamics gave me something I hadn't experienced in years: confidence. My consulting work was generating significant revenue, the auto repair shop was thriving, and for the first time since my mother's death, I felt like I was building something meaningful. But success also gave me something more dangerous: ambition. By the fall of 2021, I had developed what I believed was a revolutionary approach to automotive diagnostics that combined artificial intelligence with real-world testing protocols. Working with Sam's team at Apex Dynamics had taught me how to package my intuitive understanding of vehicle behavior into sophisticated algorithms that could predict failures with unprecedented accuracy. The system I'd created went far beyond traditional diagnostic equipment. It could analyze driving patterns, environmental conditions, and maintenance history to provide personalized recommendations for each vehicle. More importantly, it could identify potential problems weeks or even months before they became critical failures, allowing owners to address issues proactively rather than reactively. I called it the Predictive Automotive Intelligence Network, or PAIN for short, a name that Sam assured me I would need to change before presenting it to anyone with actual decision-making authority. "The technology is incredible," she said, as we reviewed the latest test results in her lab, "but you need to think bigger than just diagnostic equipment. This could be the foundation for an entire ecosystem of automotive services." She was right, of course. The implications of truly predictive vehicle maintenance extended far beyond simple repairs. Insurance companies could adjust premiums based on actual vehicle health rather than statistical averages. Fleet operators could optimize maintenance schedules to minimize downtime. Individual consumers could budget for repairs years in advance instead of being blindsided by unexpected breakdowns. The potential market was enormous, but turning potential into reality required something I'd been avoiding since my disastrous experience with Catherine Walsh's venture capital firm years earlier: investors. "You need to start your own company," Sam insisted during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "Apex Dynamics is interested in licensing your technology, but they're not equipped to bring something this revolutionary to market. You need partners who understand the automotive industry and have the resources to scale rapidly." The idea terrified me. I'd spent 3 years rebuilding my confidence and financial stability after the theft of my original diagnostic system. The thought of once again putting myself at the mercy of investors and business partners who might not share my values or respect my contributions felt like volunteering to repeat my worst nightmare. But Sam was persistent, and she had connections I couldn't ignore. Through her network of Stanford alumni and former colleagues, she arranged meetings with some of the most respected figures in automotive technology investment.
The first meeting was with Harrison Automotive Ventures, a Silicon Valley firm that specialized in transportation innovation. Their portfolio included several successful startups that had revolutionized everything from ride-sharing algorithms to autonomous vehicle navigation systems. I spent 2 weeks preparing for the presentation, creating detailed technical documentation and financial projections that demonstrated both the feasibility of my technology and its massive market potential. Sam helped me practice my pitch until I could deliver it flawlessly, anticipating every possible question and objection. The meeting took place in a gleaming conference room overlooking San Francisco Bay, with 4 partners from Harrison Automotive seated around a polished table that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. I demonstrated Payne using real vehicles in their parking garage, showing how the system could identify issues that their own mechanics had missed during recent maintenance. The technology performed flawlessly. Within minutes, my system had identified a developing transmission problem in one partner's luxury sedan, a cooling system inefficiency in another's electric vehicle, and brake pad wear in a third sports car that was approaching the threshold for replacement. "Impressive," said Marcus Harrison, the firm's founding partner. "But we have some concerns about market adoption. Consumers are notoriously resistant to new automotive technologies, especially ones that require them to change their maintenance behaviors." Additionally, added his colleague Sarah Vance, your background is somewhat unconventional for this type of venture. Most successful automotive tech entrepreneurs come from either major manufacturers or established technology companies. The questions continued for over an hour, each one designed to poke holes in my business model or highlight my lack of traditional credentials. They questioned my ability to scale manufacturing, my understanding of regulatory requirements, and my experience managing large teams. Finally, Marcus Harrison delivered the verdict. "The technology is interesting, but we don't think the market is ready for this level of predictive maintenance. Perhaps you should consider licensing your innovations to an established player who could integrate them into existing diagnostic platforms." The rejection stung, but it wasn't unexpected. I thanked them for their time and moved on to the next meeting. Detroit Innovation Capital was supposed to be different. They focused specifically on automotive technologies and had a reputation for supporting unconventional entrepreneurs with revolutionary ideas. Their managing partner, Patricia Williams, was herself a former automotive engineer who had built her investment career on identifying breakthrough technologies before they reached mainstream attention. The presentation went even better than the first one. Patricia Williams seemed genuinely excited by Payne's capabilities and asked detailed technical questions that demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of both the technology and its market potential. "This is exactly the kind of innovation the automotive industry needs," she said after watching my system predict a catastrophic engine failure in a test vehicle 3 weeks before traditional diagnostics would have detected any problems. Predictive maintenance could save consumers billions of dollars annually and prevent countless roadside emergencies. I left that meeting feeling optimistic for the first time in weeks. Patricia Williams had asked for additional technical specifications and financial projections, which I interpreted as a strong sign of interest. The rejection email arrived 2 weeks later. After careful consideration, Patricia Williams wrote, "We've decided not to move forward with an investment in Payne at this time. While we believe the technology has merit, we have concerns about your ability to execute on the business development and marketing aspects of bringing this innovation to market." The pattern continued with Morrison Tech Ventures, Automotive Innovation Partners, and 6 other investment firms over the following months. Each meeting seemed promising. Each demonstration was flawless. Each rejection was politely worded, but fundamentally the same: impressive technology, questionable execution capability, market timing concerns. By spring of 2022, I had pitched Payne to 14 different investment firms and received 14 rejections. The feedback was remarkably consistent. My technology was innovative and potentially valuable, but I wasn't the right person to bring it to market. They want someone who looks like a traditional tech entrepreneur, someone with an MBA from Wharton and experience at Google or Tesla, someone who fits their mental model of what a successful CEO should be. She was right, but understanding the problem didn't make it any less frustrating. I had created technology that could revolutionize an industry, but I couldn't access the resources necessary to bring it to market because I didn't fit investors' preconceived notions about entrepreneurial leadership. The lowest point came after my meeting with Velocity Capital, a firm that supposedly prided itself on supporting diverse entrepreneurs and unconventional business models.
Their senior partner, James Morrison, spent 45 minutes asking detailed questions about my technology before delivering what felt like the final verdict on my entrepreneurial ambitions. Aria, you're clearly brilliant, and your technology is impressive. But building a successful company requires more than technical innovation. It requires leadership skills, strategic vision, and the ability to inspire confidence in customers, employees, and investors. Frankly, we don't see those qualities in you. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom staring at rejection letters and wondering if I was delusional to think I could succeed in a world that seemed designed to exclude people like me. Maybe the smart thing would be to license my technology to an established company and accept whatever compensation they offered. Maybe trying to build something on my own was just setting myself up for another devastating failure. But Sam had other ideas. "There's one more option we haven't considered," she said when I called her to announce my intention to give up on the startup dream. "What if we didn't need traditional investors at all?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we could find a way to bring pain to market without venture capital? What if we could prove the technology's value in the real world and build a customer base before we ever talk to another investor?"
I understand, she replied, but I could hear the stress in her voice. It's just that I need the car for work tomorrow. I can't afford to miss any more days. I slid out from under the Honda, covered in transmission fluid and grease, my hands shaking with frustration. This was exactly the kind of situation my father would have handled with grace and expertise. He would have had Janet's car running perfectly in half the time it was taking me, and she would have left Bishop confident that she'd received excellent service. Instead, she was dealing with an amateur who was learning on the job while her livelihood hung in the balance. That night, I sat in the garage after everyone had gone home, staring at the diagnostic equipment I'd helped my father purchase over the years. Some of it was technology I'd recommended based on my experience at Meridian, improvements that had made the shop more efficient and profitable. But none of it mattered if I couldn't translate my knowledge into the kind of practical skill that actually helped people. The phone rang at 11:30 p.m. It was my father, calling from his bedroom upstairs where he was supposed to be resting. "How did the transmission job go?" he asked. I could have lied. I could have told him everything was fine and that I had everything under control. Instead, I told him the truth. "I'm failing, Dad. I'm failing you. I'm failing the employees, and I'm failing the customers. I don't know how to do this." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You know what your mother used to say when you were little and got frustrated with something difficult?" he finally asked. "No." "She'd say that the difference between giving up and breaking through is usually about one more try. One more attempt with everything you've learned from the previous failures." But this wasn't about one more try. This was about the fundamental realization that I'd spent 7 years running from the life I was meant to live, chasing validation from people who would never see me as anything more than a useful resource to be exploited. I'd thought success meant escaping Riverside Park and proving myself in the corporate world. Instead, I'd discovered that success meant something entirely different and much more difficult to achieve. The next morning, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. I called my supervisor at Meridian and submitted my resignation. Then, I called the bank and inquired about the process for taking over my father's business loan. Finally, I sat down with Louis, Marcus, and Frank and told them that Castellano's Auto Repair wasn't going anywhere. "I'm going to learn this business properly," I told them, "and I'm going to run it the way my father taught me, with integrity, skill, and respect for the people who trust us with their vehicles." Frank smiled for the first time since my father's heart attack. "Miss Aria, your father's going to be real proud when he hears about this." But pride wasn't going to pay the bills or teach me the skills I needed to succeed. Over the following months, I threw myself into learning every aspect of automotive repair with the same intensity I'd once applied to my engineering studies. I worked 16-hour days, took online courses in business management, and slowly,
painfully began to understand what it truly meant to run a small business. The financial pressure was relentless. Some weeks I had to choose between paying the employees and paying the rent. I sold my car and rode a bicycle to work. I moved back into my childhood bedroom to save money on rent. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches while I watched my savings account dwindle toward zero. My old colleagues from Meridian occasionally called to check in on me, their voices filled with a mixture of concern and bewilderment. They couldn't understand why I'd given up a promising engineering career to run a struggling auto repair shop in a working-class neighborhood. From their perspective, I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. What I didn't know then was that this period of struggle and uncertainty was preparing me for something much bigger than saving my father's business. Every customer interaction, every financial crisis, every night spent learning new skills was building the foundation for what would eventually become the most successful automotive technology company in the world. But in those dark months of 2019, as I struggled to keep Castellano's auto repair afloat while my father recovered, success felt like a luxury I couldn't afford to even dream about. By the winter of 2020, I'd finally found my rhythm running Castellano's auto repair. The learning curve had been steep and painful, but I was no longer the fumbling amateur who had nearly destroyed Janet Rodriguez's transmission. My father was back to working part-time, handling the lighter jobs and providing guidance when I encountered something beyond my experience. The shop was profitable again, our customer base was growing, and for the first time in months, I could sleep through the night without worrying about making payroll. But I was also profoundly lonely. Running a small business in a working-class neighborhood was isolating in ways I hadn't anticipated. My days were filled with customer interactions and employee management, but my evenings were spent alone in my childhood bedroom, reviewing financial statements and planning the next day's work schedule. My friends from Meridian had stopped calling after months of declined invitations to happy hours and weekend trips I couldn't afford. The few relationships I had attempted had withered under the pressure of 16-hour workdays and the constant stress of keeping the business afloat.
But the most dramatic validation came from Dr. Morrison's Mercedes. On a Tuesday morning in October, she called me at 6:30 a.m. with panic in her voice. "Aria, pain is showing a critical alert about my engine," she said. "It's predicting catastrophic failure within the next 48 hours. But the car is running perfectly. I just had it serviced last week, and the dealership said everything was fine." I drove to her house immediately and connected my diagnostic equipment to her Mercedes. The traditional systems showed no error codes, no warning lights, and no indication of any problems. But pain sensors were detecting microscopic vibrations and temperature variations that indicated an imminent failure in the engine's timing chain tensioner. "The dealership won't see this until it's too late," I explained, showing her the data patterns on my laptop. "But if that tensioner fails while you're driving, it could destroy your entire engine. We're talking about a $15,000 repair instead of a $300 preventative fix." Dr. Morrison was skeptical, but she agreed to take the car back to the dealership and insist that they specifically inspect the timing chain system. The service manager was initially dismissive, but when Dr. Morrison mentioned that she was a professor of mechanical engineering, he agreed to perform the additional inspection. They called her 3 hours later. "You were right," the service manager said, his voice filled with bewilderment. "The timing chain tensioner is on the verge of catastrophic failure. If you had driven this car for another week, you would have needed a complete engine rebuild." Word of Pain's success spread quickly through our small network of test subjects and their connections. Within 2 months, we had a waiting list of 50 people who wanted the system installed in their vehicles. Auto repair shops began calling to inquire about licensing agreements. Insurance companies started reaching out about potential partnerships. But the breakthrough that changed everything came from an unexpected source. Jennifer Walsh, the CEO of Nationwide Fleet Solutions, had heard about our pilot program from Dr. Morrison during a conference panel about automotive innovation. Nationwide managed vehicle fleets for some of the largest corporations in America, delivery services, sales teams, and service organizations that collectively operated more than 100,000 vehicles. We lose millions of dollars annually to unexpected vehicle failures, Jennifer explained during our first phone conversation. Our drivers get stranded, our delivery schedules get disrupted, and our maintenance costs are unpredictable. If your system can really predict failures before they occur, we need to talk. The meeting took place in Nationwide's headquarters in Columbus, Ohio, in a conference room that overlooked a vast parking lot filled with delivery trucks, service vans, and corporate vehicles. Jennifer Walsh was nothing like the venture capitalists I'd been pitching for months. She was practical, direct, and focused entirely on how Payne could solve real problems for her company. "Show me," she said simply. We spent the entire day testing Payne on vehicles from Nationwide's fleet. Sam and I worked methodically through their parking lot, installing temporary sensor arrays and running diagnostic analyses on trucks that had recently passed their standard maintenance inspections. The results were staggering. Out of 20 vehicles we tested, Payne identified developing problems in 18 of them. Brake issues, transmission wear, engine inefficiencies, and electrical problems that would have cost Nationwide hundreds of thousands of dollars in emergency repairs and operational disruptions. "How quickly can you scale this?" Jennifer asked as we concluded our demonstration. "That depends," Sam replied carefully. "How many units are you thinking about?" Jennifer Walsh smiled. "All of them, every vehicle in our fleet. And if this works as well as I think it will, every vehicle in our clients' fleets too. We're talking about potentially 500,000 installations over the next 3 years." She paused, letting the magnitude of her proposal sink in. "The question is, are you ready to build a real company?" For the first time since I'd started this journey, I looked at an opportunity and felt confident rather than cautious. We had proven technology, validated results, and a customer who understood exactly what we were offering. "Yes," I said without hesitation, "we're ready." But I had no idea that our success was about to attract the attention of people who had once written me off completely, including the cousin who was about to call me trailer trash at a family reunion. The Nationwide Fleet Solutions contract transformed everything overnight. Within 6 weeks of signing the initial agreement, Sam and I had gone from operating out of my father's garage to managing a rapidly growing company with 12 employees, a 15,000 square foot manufacturing facility in an industrial park outside Capital City, and purchase orders worth $47 million over the next 18 months. The transition was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Neither Sam nor I had ever managed a manufacturing operation or supervised more than a handful of people. Suddenly, we were responsible for production schedules, quality control systems, supply chain management, and the livelihoods of engineers, technicians, and administrative staff who had joined our team with faith in our vision. We named the company Castellano Dynamics, honoring both my family heritage and the technical innovation that made our success possible. Sam insisted that my name be on the company, despite my arguments that her contributions were equally important. "You're the one who spent years developing the core technology," she said during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "You're the one who understood how to bridge theoretical engineering with practical application. This company exists because of your vision." The first major challenge was scaling production. Our pilot program had relied on hand-assembled prototypes that took Sam and me 3 days to build per unit. Nationwide needed us to deliver 500 finished systems within 4 months, with the capability to ramp up to 200 units per week by the end of our first year. We hired Maria Santos, a former Tesla production manager who had experience scaling automotive technology manufacturing from startup levels to mass production. Maria took one look at our prototype assembly process and immediately began designing the automated production systems we would need to meet our delivery commitments. "You've got brilliant technology," she told us, "but your manufacturing approach is completely unsustainable. We need to completely redesign your hardware for automated assembly and develop quality control processes that can maintain consistency across thousands of units." The next 6 months were a masterclass in operational scaling. Maria led our production team in redesigning every component of the Payne system for efficient manufacturing, while Sam focused on software optimization and I worked on expanding our diagnostic algorithms to handle the diverse vehicle types in Nationwide's fleet. The learning curve was steep and expensive. Our first production run yielded a 40% defect rate that forced us to redesign our circuit boards and overhaul our testing protocols. Our second attempt achieved 85% quality, which was acceptable for internal testing but not for customer delivery. It wasn't until our fourth iteration that we achieved the 99.2% reliability rate that Nationwide required for fleet deployment. But as we solved each problem, our team grew more confident, and our processes became more refined. By month 8, we were consistently delivering systems that exceeded Nationwide's performance specifications while maintaining the production schedule that had initially seemed impossible. The real validation came when Nationwide began sharing performance data from their fleet deployment. The results were extraordinary by any measure. Vehicle downtime due to unexpected failures dropped by 73% in the first 6 months. Maintenance costs decreased by 41%, as fleet managers could schedule repairs proactively rather than reactively. Customer satisfaction scores improved dramatically as delivery delays caused by vehicle breakdowns became increasingly rare. More importantly, the economic impact extended far beyond Nationwide's operations. Their drivers were no longer getting stranded on highways with mechanical failures, which improved both safety and job satisfaction. Their customers received more reliable service, which strengthened business relationships and generated additional revenue. Their maintenance partners could plan work schedules more efficiently, which improved their profitability and working conditions. Jennifer Walsh became our most enthusiastic advocate, speaking at industry conferences and presenting case studies that demonstrated Payne's transformative impact on fleet operations. Within months, we were receiving inquiries from logistics companies, delivery services, and corporate fleets across North America. The second major contract came from Pacific Logistics, a company that operated delivery trucks throughout the western United States. Their CEO, David Kim, had heard Jennifer Walsh speak at a transportation industry conference and immediately saw the potential for Payne to revolutionize his operations. "We operate in some of the most challenging environments in the country," he explained during our first meeting. "Desert heat, mountain passes, stop-and-go urban traffic, and remote rural routes where a breakdown can leave a driver stranded for hours. If your system can predict failures in those conditions, we need it yesterday." Pacific Logistics ordered 200 Payne units for immediate deployment, with options for an additional 2,000 units pending successful field testing. The contract was worth $23 million and established Castellano Dynamics as a legitimate player in the commercial vehicle technology market. But it was our third major client that truly demonstrated the broad applicability of our technology. Emergency Medical Services of Greater Chicago approached us with a unique challenge. Their ambulances couldn't afford to experience mechanical failures while responding to life-threatening emergencies. "When an ambulance breaks down, people die," explained Chief Operations Officer Rebecca Torres during our initial consultation. "We need absolute reliability, but we also need cost-effective maintenance. Traditional preventative maintenance is expensive and often unnecessary, but reactive maintenance is unacceptable given the stakes." Working with EMS Chicago required us to adapt Payne for the extreme demands of emergency vehicle operations. Ambulances experience rapid acceleration, sudden stops, and constant idling that create wear patterns unlike any other vehicle type. The modifications we developed for emergency services applications improved our system's sophistication and opened up entirely new market segments. The Chicago deployment was our most closely watched project to date. Local news stations covered the installation process, and medical journals published articles about the potential for predictive maintenance to improve emergency response reliability. When the 6-month results showed a 89% reduction in ambulance breakdowns during emergency calls, the story gained national attention. Dr. Morrison, who had become an unofficial advisor to our company, called the day after the Chicago results were published. "Aria," she said, "you've created something that's going to change how society thinks about mechanical reliability. You're not just predicting vehicle failures anymore, you're preventing human suffering." The success stories multiplied rapidly. A school district in Texas used pain to ensure their buses never broke down while transporting children. A ride-sharing company in California deployed our systems to maximize vehicle uptime and driver earnings. A medical supply distributor in Florida eliminated delivery delays caused by unexpected vehicle failures, ensuring that hospitals never ran short of critical supplies due to transportation problems. Each implementation generated data that improved our algorithms and expanded our understanding of how vehicles behave under real-world conditions. Our system became more accurate, more reliable, and more valuable with every deployment. By the end of 2022, Castellano Dynamics had grown to 47 employees and was generating $89 million in annual revenue. We had deployed pain systems in over 15,000 vehicles across 12 different industries, and our technology had prevented an estimated $340 million in emergency repairs and operational disruptions. The business press began taking notice. Industry Week featured us in their Innovators to Watch issue. Fleet Management magazine named me their Executive of the Year. The Wall Street Journal published a lengthy profile about our company's rapid growth and the potential for predictive maintenance to transform multiple industries. But the recognition that meant the most came from an unexpected source. The International Association of Automotive Engineers invited me to deliver the keynote address at their annual conference, the same organization that had rejected my original diagnostic system patent application years earlier. Standing on stage in front of 3,000 automotive professionals, presenting technology that was revolutionizing an industry I'd dreamed of changing since I was a teenager working in my father's garage, I felt a profound sense of vindication. Not because of the money or the business success, but because we had proven that innovation could come from anywhere and anyone. 7 years ago, I told the audience, I was told that my ideas were interesting but not market-ready, that I lacked the credentials necessary for entrepreneurial success, and that consumers weren't ready for predictive automotive maintenance. Today, our technology is preventing thousands of vehicle failures every month and saving lives in the process. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. That night, Sam and I celebrated at a restaurant overlooking the city where we'd built our company from nothing more than determination and a belief that we could solve problems that others considered unsolvable. You know what the best part is? Sam said as we toasted our success. We did it without compromising our values or abandoning the people who supported us along the way. She was right. Throughout our rapid growth, we had maintained our commitment to the community that had shaped us. Castellano's Auto Repair remained operational, now serving as our research and development facility, where we tested new applications and trained technicians. We'd hired several employees from Riverside Park, including Luis and Marcus from my father's shop. We'd established a scholarship program for local students pursuing engineering degrees. But as I would soon discover, success brings its own challenges. Some people celebrate your achievements, while others resent them. And sometimes, the people who resent your success the most are the ones who never believed you were capable of achieving it in the first place. 3 weeks later, I received the invitation to the Fairmont family reunion that would force me to confront everything I'd left behind in pursuit of the life I'd built. The phone call that would change everything came at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in early November 2023. I was reviewing production schedules in my office at Castellano Dynamics when my assistant, Katie, knocked on my door with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Aria, you need to take this call," she said. "It's Margaret Chen from Goldman Sachs." Margaret Chen was not just any investment banker. She was the head of Goldman's Automotive Technology Division and one of the most influential deal-makers in Silicon Valley. Her calls could make or break companies, and she rarely contacted entrepreneurs directly unless something extraordinary was happening. "Ms. Castellano," Margaret's voice was crisp and professional. "I'm calling because my firm has been monitoring Castellano Dynamics' performance metrics, and we have a proposition that I believe will interest you significantly." Over the next 20 minutes, Margaret outlined an opportunity that seemed almost surreal in its scope. Volkswagen Group, one of the world's largest automotive manufacturers, was launching a global initiative to integrate predictive maintenance technology across their entire vehicle lineup. They were looking for a strategic partner who could provide the technological foundation for this transformation, and after 18 months of evaluation, they had identified Castellano Dynamics as their preferred vendor. "We're talking about an initial contract worth $2.8 billion over 5 years," Margaret explained, "with potential expansion to $8 billion if the initial deployment meets performance targets. Volkswagen wants to license your pain technology for integration into every vehicle they manufacture globally, approximately 11 million units annually." The numbers were staggering. $8 billion would make Castellano Dynamics one of the most valuable privately held technology companies in the world. It would also validate everything Sam and I had built in a way that no amount of industry recognition could match. But there was more. Additionally, Margaret continued, Goldman Sachs is prepared to facilitate a private equity investment that would provide Castellano Dynamics with the capital necessary to scale operations for this partnership. "We're looking at a company valuation of $12 billion, with potential for initial public offering within 18 months. $12 billion. The number hung in the air like something from a fantasy rather than a business conversation. The Fairmont Family Trust, which had always seemed like an impossibly vast fortune during my childhood, was worth approximately $200 million. We were discussing a company valuation that was 60 times larger than the wealth that had once defined success in my family. "I need to discuss this with my business partner," I said, struggling to maintain professional composure while my mind reeled with the implications. "Of course," Margaret replied. "We're scheduling preliminary meetings for next week. I'll have my team send over the initial documentation this afternoon." I spent the rest of the morning in a state of disbelief, reading and rereading the preliminary agreements that Goldman Sachs transmitted. The terms were extraordinary. Volkswagen was essentially betting their entire future on predictive maintenance technology, and they had chosen our company as the foundation for that transformation. Sam's reaction was characteristically analytical. She spent 3 hours reviewing the technical specifications and partnership requirements before delivering her assessment. "This is real," she said, looking up from the contract documents. "Volkswagen isn't just licensing our technology, they're integrating it into their core manufacturing processes. Every car that rolls off their production lines will have pain capabilities built in from day one." The implications extended far beyond the immediate financial windfall. Volkswagen's endorsement would establish predictive maintenance as an industry standard rather than an innovative option. Other manufacturers would be forced to develop competing technologies or risk falling behind in a rapidly evolving market. More importantly, our technology would directly impact the daily lives of millions of people around the world. Instead of being limited to commercial fleets and specialized applications, pain would become as common as airbags or anti-lock brakes in consumer vehicles. The preliminary meetings with Volkswagen's executive team took place at their headquarters in Wolfsburg, Germany. Sam and I flew there on a corporate jet that Goldman Sachs had arranged, a level of luxury that would have seemed absurd just months earlier, but now felt like a natural extension of the business world we were entering. The Volkswagen campus was massive, a May industrial complex that stretched for miles, with manufacturing facilities, research laboratories, and office buildings that housed over 100,000 employees. Walking through their halls, seeing the scale of their operations, made the significance of our partnership tangible in a way that financial projections never could. Dr. Klaus Weber, Volkswagen's Chief Technology Officer, led the presentation that would determine our future. He was a methodical engineer who had spent his career bringing innovative technologies from concept to mass production, and his questions about pain were both detailed and strategic. "Your system has demonstrated remarkable performance in fleet applications," he said, "but consumer vehicles present different challenges. Individual drivers have varying maintenance habits, diverse driving conditions, and different tolerance levels for technological complexity. How do you plan to adapt your technology for mass market deployment?" Sam and I had anticipated this question and spent weeks preparing our response. We outlined modifications that would make pain more user-friendly for consumer applications while maintaining the sophisticated diagnostic capabilities that made it effective for commercial fleets. The presentation lasted 4 hours and covered every aspect of technology integration, manufacturing logistics, quality assurance, and customer support. When Dr. Weber finally leaned back in his chair and smiled, I knew we had succeeded. "Volkswagen Group is prepared to move forward with this partnership," he announced. We believe Castellano Dynamics has developed technology that will define the future of automotive maintenance, and we want to be the first manufacturer to bring that future to our customers. The celebration dinner that evening was held at a restaurant overlooking the Rhine River, with executives from both companies toasting a partnership that would reshape the automotive industry. But for me, the most meaningful moment came when Dr. Weber pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Ms. Castellano," he said, "I want you to understand the significance of what you've accomplished. Volkswagen has been developing automotive technology for over 80 years. We have partnerships with the most sophisticated engineering firms in the world. But your innovation represents something we've never seen before, technology that truly bridges the gap between mechanical engineering and human behavior." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "In 20 years of automotive development, I have never encountered a technology that so completely solves a fundamental problem that every driver faces. You haven't just created a better diagnostic tool, you've reimagined the relationship between people and their vehicles." The formal announcement of our partnership was scheduled for the following week at the Frankfurt Auto Show, one of the industry's most prestigious events. The press conference would be covered by automotive journalists from around the world, and the market reaction would likely value our company at levels that few private companies ever achieved. But first, I had a family reunion to attend. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 days before the announcement that would establish me as one of the most successful entrepreneurs in automotive history, I would be sitting in the same country club where my family had spent decades discussing their inherited wealth and social status. The invitation had arrived 6 weeks earlier, but I'd been so focused on the Volkswagen negotiations that I'd barely given it any thought. Now, with my company valued at $12 billion and my technology about to be integrated into millions of vehicles worldwide, the prospect of facing my family felt different than it had in years past. For the first time since my mother's death, I would be returning to a Fairmont family gathering not as the black sheep's daughter who had disappointed everyone, but as someone who had built something larger than anything the family had ever achieved. Sam insisted on accompanying me to the reunion, ostensibly as moral support, but primarily, I suspected, because she wanted to witness the moment when I revealed the magnitude of what we'd accomplished. "You know," she said as we planned the trip, "there's something poetic about the timing. You're going to walk into that country club 3 days before the announcement that makes you one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world." I'd thought about wearing something modest, something that wouldn't draw attention or create unnecessary drama. But as I stood in my closet the night before the reunion, looking at the conservative dresses I'd worn to family events in the past, I realized that hiding my success would be a betrayal of everything I'd worked to achieve. Instead, I chose a dress that reflected who I'd become, confident, successful, and unashamed of the path I'd taken to get there. It was elegant without being ostentatious, expensive without being flashy, and perfectly appropriate for someone who had built a billion-dollar company from nothing more than determination and innovation. The final touch was my jewelry, not the family heirlooms that other Fairmont women wore to these events, but pieces I'd chosen to commemorate milestones in building my company. A watch I'd bought after our first major contract, earrings I'd purchased to celebrate our move into the new manufacturing facility, and a necklace Sam had given me when we reached $50 million in annual revenue. As I drove toward Newport Heights in my Tesla Model S, equipped naturally with the latest version of pain, I felt a calm confidence that I'd never experienced before. I wasn't going to the reunion to prove anything to my family. I was going because I was finally proud of who I'd become, and I wanted them to meet the person I'd grown into. What I didn't expect was that someone else would try to humiliate me before I had the chance to share my success. The silence that followed Veronica's declaration was deafening. 47 members of the Fairmont family stood frozen in their carefully arranged positions, the photographer's camera hanging unused around his neck as he tried to process what had just happened. Even by the standards of a family known for its brutal social hierarchies, Veronica had crossed a line that left everyone momentarily speechless. I felt the familiar heat of humiliation rising in my cheeks, the same sensation I'd experienced countless times during my childhood when family gatherings became exercises in establishing pecking order. But this time, something was different. This time I had a secret that would transform their understanding of everything they thought they knew about success. "You know what, Veronica," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "You're absolutely right about one thing. I will never amount to anything that fits your definition of success." I stepped forward, out from behind Uncle Theodore's broad shoulders, and moved to the center of the room where everyone could see me clearly. I'll never inherit a trust fund or marry into pharmaceutical money. I'll never run a charitable foundation that exists primarily to make wealthy people feel better about their privilege. And I'll certainly never stand in a room full of family members and publicly humiliate someone just to make myself feel superior. Aunt Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "Aria, this is neither the time nor the place for—" "Actually," I interrupted, "this is exactly the time and place. Because in 3 days, something is going to be announced that I think you'll all find very interesting." I pulled out my phone and opened the preliminary press release that Goldman Sachs had sent me for approval that morning. The document was marked confidential, embargoed until November 15th, but given the circumstances, I decided that embargo could be flexible. Volkswagen Group announced today a strategic partnership with Castellano Dynamics, the automotive technology company founded by Dr. Aria Castellano. I read aloud. The partnership includes a 5-year licensing agreement worth $2.8 billion, with potential expansion to $8 billion pending successful deployment of Castellano's proprietary predictive maintenance technology across Volkswagen's global vehicle lineup. The room remained silent, but I could see confusion beginning to replace shock on several faces. Cousin Bradley's mouth had fallen slightly open. Veronica's confident smirk was wavering. I continued reading. Goldman Sachs estimates that the partnership values Castellano Dynamics at approximately $12 billion, making it one of the most valuable privately held technology companies in the automotive sector. Uncle Theodore was the first to speak. "Aria, what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that the company I founded in Dad's garage 3 years ago is now worth 60 times more than our entire family trust," I replied. "I'm saying that the technology I developed while living above an auto repair shop is about to be integrated into 11 million vehicles annually. And I'm saying that the trailer trash and a designer knockoff just became one of the most successful entrepreneurs in automotive history." The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then Aunt Vivienne laughed, a nervous, uncertain sound that revealed how completely the family's understanding of reality had just shifted. "That's impossible," Veronica said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "If you had that kind of money, you wouldn't be living in Millfield driving a 10-year-old car." I smiled. "Actually, my car is only 2 years old, and it's equipped with technology that can predict mechanical failures 3 months before they occur. As for where I live, I choose to stay in Millfield because that's where my family and my community are. Success doesn't require abandoning the people who supported you." Dr. Morrison stepped forward from where she'd been quietly observing the confrontation. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "I can confirm everything Aria has just told you. I've been following her work for years, and Castellano Dynamics is indeed revolutionizing automotive technology. Aria hasn't just built a successful company, she's created innovation that will improve millions of lives." The photographer, sensing that this was a moment worth capturing, began taking pictures. But instead of the formal family portrait they'd planned, he was documenting the exact moment when the Fairmont family's assumptions about success, worth, and social hierarchy imploded completely. Cousin Bradley recovered first. "Aria, that's incredible," he said, his voice carrying the slightly desperate tone of someone trying to rebuild bridges he'd helped burn. "We had no idea you were involved in anything so significant." "Of course you didn't," I replied, "because none of you have spoken to me in 15 years, except to offer condescending comments about my life choices. You never asked what I was working on or whether I might need family support while building something revolutionary." Aunt Beatrice stepped forward, her face a careful mask of diplomacy. "Aria, dear, I think there may have been some misunderstandings over the years. Family relationships can be complicated, and perhaps we haven't done enough to stay connected with your pursuits." "Misunderstandings?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Aunt Beatrice, You literally had my picture removed from family publications and excluded me from holiday gatherings. That's not a misunderstanding. That's systematic erasure. The truth was hanging in the air now, impossible to ignore or rationalize away. For 15 years, the Fairmont family had treated me as an embarrassment and a disappointment, someone whose choices reflected poorly on their carefully cultivated image. Now they were discovering that their black sheep had achieved more than all of them combined. But as I watched their faces process this information, I realized something unexpected was happening. Instead of shame or genuine remorse, I was seeing calculation. I could practically watch them reassessing my value as a family member and considering how my success might benefit their own social standing. Uncle Theodore cleared his throat. "Aria, I hope you know that family support is always available when you need it. Building a company of that magnitude must require significant resources and connections." "Business expansion in Europe can be complex," Aunt Vivienne added. "Our family has relationships with several investment banks that might be helpful as you develop international markets." Even Veronica was recalibrating. "I think there may have been some miscommunication earlier," she said, her voice honey-sweet with newfound interest. "I was actually commenting on how brave you are for staying true to your authentic style rather than conforming to conventional expectations." I stared at them in amazement. They were trying to rewrite history in real time, transforming 15 years of rejection and condescension into misunderstandings and missed opportunities for connection. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "You don't get to pretend this conversation didn't happen. You don't get to claim that your treatment of me was some kind of miscommunication. And you definitely don't get to suddenly offer family support now that my success might benefit your social status." Sam stepped forward from where she'd been watching the entire confrontation unfold. "Aria," she said quietly, "we should probably discuss something privately." She was holding her phone, and her expression suggested that whatever news she'd received was significant. We stepped away from the family group, and she showed me the screen. "Goldman Sachs just called," she whispered. "The Volkswagen announcement got leaked to the automotive press. It's already trending on financial news sites, and our company email is being flooded with interview requests." I looked at the screen and saw our story spreading across social media. Garage startup signs $8 billion, deal with Volkswagen. Female entrepreneur builds $12 billion company after family rejection. From auto repair shop to automotive revolution, the Aria Castellano story. But there was more. Sam scrolled to a text message from our public relations firm. "Major investigative piece publishing tomorrow. Suggests Fairmont family tried to claim credit for your success. Need immediate response." My blood went cold. Somehow, someone had connected my business success to the Fairmont family and was planning to publish a story that would drag our family dynamics into the public spotlight. Given the timing and the specific focus on family rejection, it was clear that someone had been investigating my background and had discovered the very confrontation we were having at this moment. "There's something else," Sam continued. 3 different news outlets are reporting that Veronica Fairmont gave interviews claiming that the family has always supported your entrepreneurial endeavors and that your success reflects the Fairmont commitment to innovation. I felt my stomach drop. Even as we stood in this room, even as the evidence of their rejection was fresh in everyone's memory, Veronica was already trying to claim credit for my achievements and rewrite our family history for public consumption. "She's telling reporters that tonight's reunion was planned as a celebration of your business success," Sam whispered. "She's claiming that the family has been your secret financial backers all along." I looked back at my family, who were now huddled in animated conversation, their phones out as they undoubtedly coordinated their public response to my sudden prominence. They weren't processing their treatment of me or reconsidering their values. They were strategizing about how to capitalize on my success while minimizing their own culpability. The irony was perfect and infuriating. I had finally achieved success beyond anything the Fairmont family had ever accomplished, but instead of vindication, I was facing a new challenge: protecting my story and my company's reputation from people who wanted to steal credit for achievements they had actively opposed. "What do we do?" Sam asked. I looked around the country club's opulent dining room, At the family that had spent 15 years treating me like an embarrassment. At the photographer, who was now documenting what would probably become a very public story about family dynamics and entrepreneurial success. We tell the truth, I said, all of it. Every rejection, every condescending comment, every time they excluded me from family events. If they want to claim credit for my success, they're going to have to explain why they tried so hard to prevent it. Outside, I could hear the distinctive purr of a Rolls-Royce Phantom pulling into the country club's circular driveway. My ride had arrived, not because I needed to make a dramatic exit, but because Sam had arranged for us to attend the Goldman Sachs celebration dinner that was starting in 2 hours. The Fairmont family reunion was over, but the real story was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.